So my name's Leandra Hernandez. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Utah. And I finished my PhD 10 years ago, but after a winding road, I'm in my second year now at the University of Utah. Yeah, so I have a little bit of an atypical story. So like I said, I finished my PhD in 2014, but my spouse was in the military for 10 years in the Navy. So when I was in graduate school and he was stationed in Virginia, we were married for 3 years before he finally said, hey, we should live together at some point, right? So when I got to my last year of my PhD, I told my advisor, I'm moving to California. He's getting stationed in San Diego. And my advisor's like, well, we don't normally say this is okay, but if you promise me you'll finish your dissertation, we'll send you off with good wishes, right? So from 2013 to 2018, I was an adjunct because I was a trailing spouse and we were stationed in California and in Japan. So I was teaching online before online was cool, or maybe less cool, depending on your orientation to it. And at his 10-year mark, he said, okay, I think I'm finally ready to let go of the military. Do you want to go on the tenure track market? And I was like, thank the heavens, because I didn't think I'd be able to until I was in my late 40s. So yeah, I went from being an adjunct to an assistant professor at Utah Valley University, which is a teaching institution, and now I'm at the University of Utah. So I've been at all kinds of institutions and all different levels, but yeah, I think we're finally settling down. Chicana feminist theories have always kind of been like my roots or my home place, my home space, right? To quote Bell Hooks, because living in so many different places, both domestically and abroad, I've been surrounded, fortunately, by so many beautiful cultures, but Chicana feminist theories is also kind of what brings me home, right? And I remember when I was an undergrad, and this happens to so many of us, right? And it shouldn't happen. I took my first feminist theory class. We had one Women of Color feminist theory week. We had a reading by Bell Hooks, we had a reading by Gloria Anzaldúa, and a few others. And I read Gloria Anzaldúa and I thought to myself, this is finally myself in a book, right? Because I'm also from Texas, my mother's family is from the Rio Grande Valley, and so on and so forth. And I remember thinking it was so significant that I just dove into it. And my work is a little sporadic, some might say, and I joke with my former committee chair that I like to research the kitchen sink, but I also say that we don't live single issue lives, therefore we don't use single theories or single frameworks. So I do some work in health communication, journalism studies, Latino communication studies, military communication studies, but Chicana feminist theories of nepantla, liminality, space, belonging, right? Those are central to everything. And it's so much so that I co-edited a book collection with my sibling scholar, Robert Gutierrez Perez, that's essentially a love letter to Gloria Anzaldúa and Chicana feminist theories in our field. And I've had scholars tell me in the past that Gloria Anzaldúa is not a real philosopher, that she shouldn't be cited in communication, and I think that goes back to a lot of the themes from our symposium. But I think it also speaks to the power of community-centered work and bridge building when we're able to bring together so many scholars from so many different positionalities who can say, yeah, Chicana feminist theories have shined light on my work for so many reasons, and this is why we need to make space for it in our field. It comes down to a few factors. So part of it is lived experience, right? So many of us do research that's informed by our lives and our cultures, or that informs our lives and our cultures. It's also a combination of trying to balance the research collaboratives I'm working in with contemporary events that are happening, right? So some of my earlier work more specifically focused on military communication studies because those were the communities I was centrally located in and working with most directly. So I have one co-edited project on military spouses just navigating the black hole that is the military, and then on military communication and pedagogy. But now it's shifting and ebbing and flowing more to think about gender violence and reproductive justice and injustice, particularly with an eye to femicides, right? And this is not just transnationally Latin American, but also thinking about important cases that are happening right now, like with the murder of Vanessa Guillen, right? The service member who was murdered in Texas. So it's a combination not only of what's happening in the moment, but also thinking about my co-authors and my collaborators, right? Like, we always have multiple things in the pipeline. It's like, okay, who's going to be first author on this? Who's going to be first author on this? Kind of like you do in your lab, right? There's so many projects working, you're switching author ordership and all of these other things. And then you say, what can we prioritize in this moment with our bandwidth, with our mental health, and with the access to resources that we have? So just a few of those ideas. Yeah, it has been a long labor of love and a winding path that I've been fortunate to navigate with other mentors who came before me, right? Traditionally, in most graduate programs, co-authoring is frowned upon, right? Like, you're supposed to establish your expertise and you're supposed to show folks that you know what you're doing. And if any of my senior scholars in my department watch this later, please don't get mad at me for saying this, but I firmly always tell my graduate students, like, collaborating is kind of the heart of what we do, right? My work is better because of the individuals I work with and vice versa. Sometimes it happens by chance, sometimes it happens by networking, sometimes it happens when someone introduces you to someone and relationships grow organically. But I always like to tell the story of my colleague, Dr. Sarah de los Santos Upton, because we've published so many projects together, like a few books, one co-edited book on the way, and people assume that we went to grad school together or that we're in the same department, neither of which is true. She came up to me at a conference in 2013 after a panel and said, I really like your hair. Can we be friends? And I was like, oh my God, I really like your hair. Like, it sounds so ridiculous, but that was 11 years ago, and we stayed in touch. We have a lot of the same interests. And similarly, my good friend Stevie Munns at my previous institution, she's formally trained as an oral historian and an autoethnographer. I'm formally trained in other methods. So we thought, why don't we put our brains together and start thinking about ethics of space making and ethics of storytelling and oral histories and all of these other things. It literally just starts with a, hey, I have a research idea. What are your thoughts on this? Do you want to go in on it with me? And then the magic really does kind of happen from there. But I also say that acknowledging that collaboration and like building community is not just an academic endeavor, right? Like, my mom and my dad used to tell me all the time, your PhD is not just for you, it's to give back to other people, right? You're nodding because we have like so many similarities. And I remember hearing that when my dad's saying, like, you don't understand how privileged you are, right? Like, this is not about you and it won't ever be about you, and you need to keep that in mind. And that ethos has also informed the community engaged work that I do, not just from a research perspective, but also pedagogically. And at the end of the day, it also helps ensure that there's like a mentorship angle to all of it. And it's not just top-down mentorship, it's lateral mentorship, it's community building. And Sarah created this idea of comadrismo, or like co-madre, right? Co-mother, as a way of mentoring. And she and I, with our other friends, Amanda Martinez and Diana Martinez, are developing that as like an actual mentorship framework, right? So what does it mean to co-mentor each other through editing and writing and space making? And how can we incorporate Chicana feminist ethos principles of like comunidad, right, or hermanidad, into making academia not just a safer space, but a braver space for all of us. And more publications helps us get tenure faster, right? And we all know that women of color are radically underrepresented in the academy, especially Latinas. So shout out to our co-creators, right? Jaime Guzman, Amanda Martinez, who I've already mentioned, and Carlos Tarin. We all like to joke that we're academic sister scholars, scholar siblings, so on and so forth. And fun fact, Amanda Martinez and I were graduate students together at Texas A&M, which is where we first met Dr. Srivi. So the lineage comes together in very powerful ways. But we created the caucus mentorship in 2016, and it was one of the first at the National Communication Association, if not the first, mentorship collaborative through our caucuses. And it's still running strong. We hold panels and gatherings every year at the conference. And if I were to think about what I hope the future would be, it would be not only increased, stronger alliances with other caucuses in our national organization, but it's also a combination of like radical transformation and radical joy. And like my colleague Carlos Tarin and I have been talking a lot about the politics of trauma, right? Because as two queer Chicano individuals, we're like, okay, trauma's everywhere, right? And we've been talking about trauma for years. And I think going back to some of our themes from the symposium, we want to think more about joy, right? What does queer joy look like? What does Latina or ex-ed joy look like, right? And how can we use that not only to transform our own personal experiences, but our collective experiences with the academy? Like, how can we move from being thankful we're surviving to ensuring that we're thriving communally? And that's really what I hope to see come from our initiative in the future. I remember thinking that 15 years ago when I first started graduate school, and it's still the case, although like Dr. Dixon said, we're moving the needle, right? Things are happening. First and foremost, the networking opportunities are critical, whether it's asking your professors who are other graduate students or professors you should be reaching out to, not even at your institution, but elsewhere. If you have the opportunity to present at and or just go to conferences, right? Show up, talk to people, get to know individuals, and make the magic happen there. I remember when I was at Texas A&M, and I was having all of my own identity crises, right, about what I was going to do and what I wanted to study. I remember looking at Dr. Srivi and Dr. Tasha Dubrini as two women who do the work and mentor well, right? And I remember going to Tasha saying, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm going to drop out of grad school. And she's like, okay, calm down. You're not going to drop out. We all go through it. Let's retool, right? So then she was actually one of the first individuals who said, have you heard about some of these caucuses at NCA? Like, here's some graduate students I think you should reach out to. You're citing all of these individuals in your work. They're going to be at NCA. Why don't you go to one of their panels and introduce yourself? And if you're an introverted individual, nothing sounds more terrifying, right? But I really do mean it when I say that the magic happens when you just say hi. And also, it comes down to finding your collaboratives that will not only support you in the work that you're currently doing, but where you want to go. Because I promise you, there have been times where I've talked to Sarah, Carlos, Amanda, Stevie. I said, I've got this idea. What do you think? And sometimes they'll be like, that's bonkers. And other times they'll be like, but maybe there's something there, right? And if it wasn't for these mentors, these spaces, the caucuses, right, the mentorship initiative, I realistically probably would have dropped out of my PhD program. And I threatened it at least 17 times. And my mom said, I will drive to College Station and make sure you don't drop out, right? And I'm very thankful that I didn't, because things always get better. But the power of community is radically understated, especially in academia, which is still very siloed and isolationist. So find your peeps, make your peeps, I'll be your peep, and we keep going, right? Because I think the power is in the solidarity, right? And I think our field is starting to catch on to that too.
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Srivi Ramasubramanian. I'm the director of CodeShift, the Collaboratory for Data Equity, Social Healing, Inclusive Futures and Transformation. Thanks for watching Chai with Srivi.